Good evening and welcome. I'm Marty Hoofer, Digital Content Manager for Keep Indiana Learning, and we are thrilled to have you here tonight for the fourth installment in our early childhood series this spring. And for our fourth part tonight, we are again thrilled to have Angielena Williams with us. I'll let her introduce herself, give her title and her position. But Angielena, I know you come with a extensive background. You look at early childhood from so many different angles, and that's why I love having you as a presenter for Keep Indiana Learning. You don't just bring one perspective, you bring a number of perspectives. So I'm thrilled to have you tonight with supporting behaviors in a multi-age class. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marty. And thank Keep Indiana Learning for always welcoming me to the platform. And so I am here to talk to you all tonight about supporting behaviors in multi-age classrooms. My name again is Angielena Williams, and I am a senior project manager for the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. Really love what I do, have been in the field for over 25 years and have held multiple capacities from early childhood teacher to program director to Head Start Center director. I worked in higher ed. And so I really wanted to talk to you about what a multi-age classroom really is and talk a little bit about the developmental milestones and why it's important to know about the developmental milestones. And then we're going to discuss the benefit of a multi-age classroom, which is going to help you see why it helps to curb those behaviors. And then we're going to examine how to encourage positive behaviors in a multi-age classroom. And so I know maybe some of you saw the title and thought, well, maybe this is going to be all about behaviors, but it's really going to focus and how those benefits and the teacher's role can help create positive environments for positive behavior. So what is a multi-age classroom? So I want you to take a moment and just think about that. Just take a moment and think about that. What is a multi-age classroom? So I'll share that a simple definition is that a mixed age group of children stay with the same teacher for 2 or more years with a classroom founded on research and learning theory about how children learn, and that guides developmentally appropriate practices. So the key here is that the children are staying with the teacher for 2 or more years. And so a lot of us have worked in preschools where we have children that are ages 3 years to age 5. And so that counts as that being with a teacher for 2 or more years, especially when you have parents that request that their child return to you if they started out with you as a 3-year-old or as a 4-year-old that doesn't make the cutoff for kindergarten. And there are so many positive reasons why that is effective and why that makes that difference as it relates to supporting positive behaviors in a classroom. I wanted to make sure that we focus a lot on that. But before we do that, we're going to look at how this research is based in the foundations of learning theory. And so the research foundations for multi-age classrooms focuses on the constructivist learning theory and the social learning theory. And so let's talk a little bit about the constructivist learning theory. So the constructivist learning theory, you have Jean Piaget, who, invented and talked about the differences in the learning stages, sensory motor, pre-operational, operational, concrete. And so we want to look at some of those reasons that they give, like children learn as whole persons. Children construct their own knowledge of the world. Children progress through the stages of cognitive development. Children learn through active and meaningful experiences, and they learn through a process. They learn through play, which is really big because sometimes, especially now, it seems as though play is being looked at as not children's work when it actually is. And there's a lot of focus more on academia in the lower grades. And so just getting back to the basics and remembering that play is children's work and how children learn best. And then that learning is individual. Then we go into the social learning theory, and that they talk a lot about the zone of proximal development, and so otherwise known as ZPD. And that is where a child can do a lot of things with what they know and then what they want to know when they have a capable adult or a peer that can assist them. Then they talk a lot about social interactions, pro-social behaviors, emotional and cognitive growth. So thinking about that, we look at the developmental milestones and talk a little bit about the importance of the developmental milestones. So I want you to take a moment here and think about what you see, and if you've seen a chart like this or something similar, and if you use something like this in your classroom or something like a checklist, a developmental checklist for your 3s, 4s, and 5s to help you guide their individual progress throughout the school year. So take a moment and look this over. This one goes up to age 4 years, but they do have developmental checklists for children all the way up to age 8. And so that is considered early childhood, is birth through age 8. And so I wanted to share that, but we're focusing more on preschool in this session. So just taking a look at this and thinking about what you use in your classroom currently. So let's talk about the importance of the developmental milestones. So they involve the physical, social, emotional, cognitive, and communication skills that children need to learn and to develop and to grow. Teachers are better able to understand how children typically grow. And that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're dealing with a multi-age classroom. You really do need to know the developmental milestones for the 3s, for the 4s, and for those 5s that may not have made the cutoff for kindergarten, but will be going to kindergarten soon. And so having that information will help you to individualize the care to each one of those children as they progress along throughout the school year. Developmental milestones provide a roadmap for typical development to assist in identifying any need for early intervention. So another, huge reason why we need to know the developmental milestones as well is because it will help us identify if we have children that may need that extra help, and have those conversations with our director and with those families. Then it helps teachers plan for activities that are developmentally appropriate. So it gives you that opportunity to see where children are typically developing at that age, things that those children can do, and then things and activities and lessons that you can create to challenge them a little bit more to help them to reach that next level. And being in a multi-age classroom, and working with those older peers, they get to see that next level right there in front of them. And so it helps with that interaction, that social interaction. And we'll learn a little bit more about what else that encourages as we move through this presentation. So I wanted you to remember this, growth. What do you think that I mean about this when I say growth? There are two things that I'm looking for. Growth as it relates to the children, and then growth as it relates to us as the adults. What do you think that I'm talking about here when I mention growth? So let's think about the growth as it relates to the children and how they are growing and learning alongside one another. And then we should have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And so that growth mindset is going to help us to be open, to be reflective, to be conscious of what we're doing, and to be intentional about the plans that we make. And to be respectful of the children at each stage that they're at in their growth and in their development. So now let's talk a little bit about the benefits of a multi-age classroom. So one of the benefits is that children are viewed as unique individuals, and we would think that this would happen in the same age classroom as well. So say you had a classroom of all 4-year-olds, and you would want to make sure that they are all treated as unique individuals in that class as well as in a multi-age classroom. But you have to be more intentional in a multi-age classroom, knowing those different developmental milestones and where each child is in their continuum or on their continuum. Children are not labeled according to their ability, and children learn at their own rate. And so when you have same age children in a classroom, sometimes there tends to, and you'll see that in one of the upcoming comments, you'll see that there's more of an opportunity to label the children as failing. You might want to retain a child if they're not meeting or mastering some of their skills. And so when it comes to a multi-age classroom, there's a little bit of a difference because you are not comparing those children as more so as you are trying to help them get to that next level and what they see in that classroom. And those children are helping each other. And so you're getting that cooperation along with the children and working with what they're doing in their class and helping along with their student peers. And then children have the opportunity to serve as mentors and take leadership roles. And so some of us in our preschool classrooms, we have taken the sense of providing jobs for our children, so classroom jobs. And so some of those older children you may separate your children into groups, and you may have some of the older children be those peers that are in charge of a group or in charge of an activity or in charge of a center, just to help facilitate some of the learning that's going on with the younger children that are in the class. And then just as I was mentioning earlier, children are more likely to cooperate than they are. Older children model more sophisticated approaches to problem solving because they have that maturity. They're more capable in some instances, and we're looking at that typically developing child. And so children are also invited to take charge of their learning. And so you'll see this when we start to talk about the teachers' roles, which help to curb unwanted behaviors, and how taking charge of their learning is based on positive models for behavior and for social skills. And so you may see more patience, more attention span, more of a readiness to learn. So the younger children get to see that, and they get to look at how those older children are modeling that behavior, and then they take that upon themselves to try that and try to be that mindful as well when it comes to their own behaviors. And then lastly, as it relates to the benefits, children get to stay with the same teacher for more than a year. And so what you'll see as we talk a little bit more is that those teachers get to develop a deeper relationship with those families, especially of those returning students, and strengthen that homeschool connection. And so how great is it to start with a 3-year-old, and then that 3-year-old stays with you until they turn age 5 and get ready to go to kindergarten. So you've had that experience with that family trusts you more. You're more comfortable having conversations about things that you need to have with that family, having those sometimes difficult conversations, and then having those conversations about maybe some of the behaviors that you're seeing in the class are not as uncomfortable and maybe not even as common because there's such a good relationship between you and the home life and what's going on at home. So let's take another moment to stop and think. So we talked about what a multi-age classroom was, and then we talked about what the benefits were. So what about the behaviors? I know that's something that take a moment and have you think about these 4 words that are listed here. So when thinking about behaviors, what we want to do is we want to empower the children. We want to enhance the lessons and the activities that we have planned. We want to make sure that the children are engaged, because what they say, and I've said this in another presentation, idle hands are the devil's playground, where you want to make sure that the children are busy and that they're engaged and that they're doing things, and that they're doing things that have meaning to them, so that they are not engaged in things that they're not supposed to do. And then you also want to enable us as teachers and educators. We want to enable the children. We want them to be self-autonomous. We want for them to, we want to enable them to take care of themselves and to be able to do that to get to mastery and to be able to accomplish those things that we set forth for them. And we want to make sure that what we're doing is child-centered and not curriculum-centered. And so in doing that, just thinking about these 4 words again: empower, enhance, engage, and enable. So I want you to think about everything that we've talked about, the definition of a multi-age classroom and what some of those benefits are. And think, if you have one of those multi-age classrooms, how do you see those benefits? And how are those benefits that we've talked about so far, how are those helping to empower and enhance, engage, and enable the children that you work with on a regular basis? So just take a moment and think about that. Now I want to talk to you about the teacher's role. So when we look at the teacher's role, this is really what's going to help to curb those behaviors. And so looking at offering open-ended materials that can challenge children at many different developmental levels. And why do we need to worry about that? Well, because we're working with a multi-age classroom. Even if you were working with the same age classroom, say you're working with 4-year-olds, all 4-year-olds don't develop at the same rate. So all children are so different. They grow at different rates. It goes back to that sign that I showed you that said growth. All of the children grow at different rates. And so we want to be respectful of them as those unique individuals that we talked about. But it's even more so when you're dealing with a multi-age classroom, and knowing those developmental milestones, as we talked about earlier, will help you to be able to offer open-ended materials that can challenge all of the children, regardless of what age that they are. Then you want to make sure that you plan specific activities that offer new challenges to older children. So we want to make sure that the children in the classroom are not getting bored with us trying to cater to one age group. And so just making sure that we think about that, and that we offer some of those additional supports to those older children to give them a little bit more of a push and a little bit more of a challenge. You want to cultivate a strong sense of community. And so making sure that you bring everyone together, and that during your whole group time, that you all are letting there be opportunities for the younger children, as well as the children that are in the middle and the children that are the oldest in the class, have an opportunity to speak, have an opportunity to share, have an opportunity to have different roles in the classroom, which leads us into the next one. And not just talking about the older children taking on leadership roles, but all of the children should be able to participate in some way to have a role in leadership in the classroom, which again, giving them something to do helps to curb on those behaviors. And then you want to encourage the younger children to seek out help and support from the older children. And we're not expecting for those children, the older children, to take on, leading a lesson or being in charge of putting anything together, but there are some things that they can do to help to encourage the younger children that are in the classroom to be more successful at the things and the tasks that are set forth to them to do. So you also want to support each individual child's learning and development and plan special challenges just for them. So going back to that, treating children as unique individuals. And so we would hope that we would do this in the same age classroom, but it's very important in a multi-age classroom because again, you may be planning, what if you are planning activities and the activities that you're planning cater more to the older children in the classroom? Then the younger children are going to be frustrated because they feel like they can't master whatever it is that the activity is. And so you want to make sure that you have those developmental milestones in mind when you're trying to create that continuum again. So you're going from age 3 to age 5 and making sure that you're taking those individual children, their ages and where they are in the ages and stages in account when you're developing activities and programs just for them. And then you want to make sure that you're facilitating the development of relationships across all of the ages. So having those whole group activities where they get to interact, having those times where in small group where they all get to interact together, and then just having those one-on-one check-ins with the children throughout the course of the day will help with that. And then you want to make sure that you are incorporating open-ended materials and projects so that the children have a say. It encourages them to have critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills, social interactions. I mean, it just really goes across the gambit of all of the things that it encourages when you have open-ended materials and projects available for the children. So I wanted to share some additional research. So according to Song, Spradlin, and Plucker in 2009, the enhanced social and natural settings in multi-age classrooms can help raise children's social and emotional skills. Children's disobedience is considerably less prevalent in multi-age group settings. There's a higher rate of language exchange, and you can see that where the older children may have a larger vocabulary than the younger children. And so having those conversations, and then based off of how you have your classroom set up in your daily routines throughout the day, which we'll talk about in a minute, will help with that language exchange and the conversations and the feedback loops that are going on in the classroom. And then children in multi-age classrooms achieve a higher cognitive developmental level at a faster rate than those same age peers. And that's because they are involved with, they have opportunities to be mentors and to be leaders with the older children, and the younger children get a chance to see where they should be and where they're going to be next. And then such caring, individualized, and emphasized project-based community can improve children's attitudes towards school. So when you have these multi-age classrooms, they say that it's like having a family, and these children feel more comfortable. They've been with this teacher for a couple of years. The teacher and their family have good relationships, and then school doesn't seem like such the big bad monster when it's time for them to go to kindergarten. So lastly, I wanted to talk about routines and rituals, because to curb those behaviors, you really need to make sure that you have your routines and your rituals down. So when we talk about routines, we would talk about those structures that encourage discourse, sense making, and equity in the classroom. And so making sure that you have a daily daily routines or a daily schedule, making sure that those things are things that the children can predict that are going to happen throughout the course of the day. And then those rituals, do you have a good morning ritual? Do you have a reading of the story ritual? Do you have a nap time ritual? Do you have a it's time to go home ritual? And so just thinking about those things that you have that always happen, that the children can guarantee that are going to be in place for them, also will help to curb those behaviors, those unwanted behaviors. And so in summary, understanding what the definition of a multi-age classroom is and the benefits of having that grouping, along with the in-depth knowledge of developmental milestones, provides a pathway for teachers and educators to create an environment that focuses on the positive, decreasing unwanted behaviors. And so I really hope that talking about what a multi-age classroom was, getting you to remember to think about the developmental milestones and being abreast of those, having those developmental checklists, making sure we talked about the benefits of having a multi-age classroom. And then we talked about the teachers' roles and the things that could be put in place to help curb some of those behaviors, those unwanted behaviors. And so having all of that in place will really help to have that multi-age classroom function and run as smoothly as possible. And so I open it up now for any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't know that anyone has any questions, Angelina, but this is Marty jumping on. So many thoughts as you talk, so I'm not sure I'm going to have them in any great order.
No,
But one of the things that you kept talking about was leadership in a multi-age classroom. And I thought that was so interesting, since you have a whole session on student leadership and, tying those together. And leadership isn't just for big kids. Leadership starts at age 3, which I think is really empowering for students.
It does. It does. And it really helps too for the younger children to be able to be involved in those leadership roles, and to see some of the older children carrying those out, even if they're not very comfortable at first. Maybe having those older children that are in the classroom have some of those other leadership roles will make them feel more comfortable when it's their turn to have that job.
That's a great point. That is a great point. I hadn't thought about, like, helping them grow into the leadership. Yeah. That's a neat idea. And you mentioned this a couple times too, that whole idea of the project-based approach to learning, that learning happens, I hate to say this, despite curriculum sometimes. We don't need, nothing wrong with curriculum. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, but there's other ways to learn. And what a great way to have leadership and kids finding their passions when they're working in these small groups in a project type approach.
Yes. And so, and you think of something as simple as having maybe your older children passing out some of the materials that may be needed for the project, or even having some of the younger children put together something in the project and ask questions to everyone else in the group. I mean, there are so many different ways, and being hands-on is what I really like about the project approach, because they get to observe, they get to manipulate, they get to examine, they get to experiment. And then what it does is it sparks those conversations. And for those younger children that may not have the words, listening to their teachers ask the questions and listening to their peers respond, I think it just helps to build that vocabulary. And they go home and they share, what they did in their day. And so, it just feeds, that feedback loop goes all the way to the home. And so I really, really love that and really encourage the project-based approach.
Absolutely. And thinking about that, I like, something you said, that maybe if they don't have the words, but if they hear the words, maybe by the time they get home, the words are there. Like they've heard their teachers say it, they've heard their peers say it, they've had some time to chew on it. We don't know what's happening at home, but those words might just be happening there, which, how exciting is that then from the parent perspective?
Yes, exactly. So thank you for that. I really, really just love talking a lot about multi-age classrooms, because, as a teacher, that's what I had, was 3 to 5 year olds. And so really loved having to be able to work with all of the ages and trying to figure out who they were and at what time, and when would this one, maybe next year they'll be able to do this, or I wonder what they're going to come back from the summer and be like. It's just so amazing when you get to be with your students for more than 1 year.
Oh, yes. As a former middle school teacher, I'm envious of you because I saw them for such a short time. And so I would have opportunity to go to the high school that my middle school fed into. And so when I would either see the kids at the high school or out in the community, I'd be like, oh, look, you grew up. You're not
Oh,
12 anymore. And then just to have conversations with them, that those conversations didn't happen when they were 12, but shoot, it happened just the other day at Kroger with a student. And, he's a junior now and he's studying HVAC and he's telling me about all these great things he wants to do.
wow.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, so I saw him for just a short little window of time, but that growth that happens from 3 to 5, that is monumental style growth that's going on. So how neat to get to be a part of that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Angielena, thank you for your time tonight. This has been such a fantastic series. Obviously, you found this on our YouTube channel. There are others in this series on this same playlist. Angielena had a previous session on student leadership, and then Kristen Parisi did 2 sessions, one on accreditation and one on communication needs. So really covering the gamut of topics. You can get your PGP certificate by going to keepindianalearning.org/PGP, and you can get your PGP certificates there to prove you were here this evening and spent 30 minutes of your time with us. So thank you, Angielena. Thank you for your time and your expertise, and we look forward to what you have coming with us in the future.
Thank you so much for having me so much.